Okay, so for whoever is going to watch us on YouTube later, welcome to the CSSC event, Fall 2021, How to Present Your Research. We would like to thank all the panelists who joined us today, and we have short talks, like 15 minutes talks for each panelist. And we somehow divided the talks into two parts. The first part covered the research in academia. We have Dr. Justin Ruths, assistant professor at the University of Texas at Dallas, and Dr. Lin Jiang, assistant professor in San Jose State University. And then in the second part, we mostly cover the research in industry with Dr. Farid Tajaddodianfar, who is a research scientist at Amazon, and Dr. Jonathan Horn, a support engineer at NASA. And then we move on and open the floor for discussion and Q&A. But meanwhile, we can have a short Q&A, like 1 or 2 questions after the first part with the two panelists, and then we can move on and then open the discussions later. So please keep your questions and for the open discussion and QA, and also you can type in the chat box. I can take your questions there as well and ask from the panelists later. And I would appreciate it if you keep your mic muted and just raise your hand during the Q&A session for asking a question. So I will hand it over to Justin for his talk. Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here and talk to you about a topic that I'm rather passionate about, which is presenting. Hopefully everybody can see my screen now. You can stop me if you don't see the screen. I also want to just say that I really like and applaud the effort to build this group, this CSSC. My undergrad is from Rice University, and so we always said that we always took pride in the fact that we couldn't fill our football stadium with our alumni. And so the good news is I think CSSC has already accomplished that. We already filled the football stadium at UTD. Maybe our objective will be now to move towards filling the TI auditorium with DSC grads and alumni. So I thought today I would take, since we have many good panelists, gonna give some really great insight on presenting. I thought I'd take a little bit of a unusual angle at this, and I'm going to talk about figures. And so this is something I am also passionate about. Maybe in a future event, I'd like to host a workshop where I can kind of show the details of kind of just technically how you build some of these figures. But for now, I'd like to kind of just hopefully bring some inspiration and kind of talk about the usefulness of building really quality figures. And this goes for both presentations as well as written or published like papers and things like that. As I was building this, I decided that it was extremely meta of us to kind of present about presenting, and so it's always it takes a little bit of enough pride in what you do in order to present on a topic, essentially do the action and give feedback while you're doing that action. So hopefully this is well received. So my base principle for this talk, and it's going to be relatively simple, is just that everything that you do when you're presenting really ought to be a tailored approach. And this is obviously at odds with the fact that we like to build a deck of slides and kind of reuse those time and time again. The reason why, this is probably something that everyone's going to touch on, but the reason why presenting has to be tailored to a particular event is because you have different goals. Sometimes you're selling yourself, sometimes you're selling your work, sometimes you're just informing people. Your audience varies differently, different technical levels, different interests of the audience. You've got issues related to whether you're doing this on Teams or whether you're doing this in person, or if it's a small group presentation, or if it's a large format. You've got different time, and so I mean a lot of these are pretty obvious. My my leading principle of what I'm talking about today is the fact that good figures is going to be kind of the silver bullet that allows you to make a set of slides that is highly customizable. And really what it boils down to is that it allows you as the presenter to shine. And so if you understand the material and if you are comfortable talking about it, then you don't need any crutches, and you can use your figures in the way that it allows your insight on the problem and your kind of technical expertise to kind of be the center stage, and the figures are really just facilitating that. So some of the features that we want out of figures, I'd say that we want them to be clear, but I think we can go further. We can say that we want them to be obvious. So the message that you're trying to say should be something that's kind of beyond clear. We want them to look good. We want them to be appealing. If we want them to be highly tailored, or what I'm calling this bespoke figures, we want to create something that allows you to talk at some depth about a topic. And so you want your figures to have some very clear message at the beginning, but also offer you as the presenter and the expert as a way of kind of peeling open this onion and revealing kind of the more subtle things that are inside. So if you can build a figure that has this depth to it, that really makes it useful. And finally, you're going to try to build a story. So ultimately, you're trying to build a story, and very similar to the making your presentation tailored to all of these different features, audience, venue, space, and so on. You also want to make your figures and your approach there tailored. All right, so I'm going to have the hubris to essentially not pull good figures from everywhere, but just pull good figures from my own work. And partially that's because I know it, and partially that because if there is any fault, I can take that directly rather than put that on anyone else. So these are all going to be figures that come from papers and presentations of mine, and I think each one of them just kind of emphasizes a particular point. And so I won't spend too much time on each one of these. And again, in a future talk, I'd love to kind of talk a little bit more deeply about how you make some of these figures. But one thing that I want to say on this one is the fact that in this paper, we struggled with finding a great way to present some information. In this particular example, we had some statistics about a network that were related to each other, and so they actually kind of had this preserved quantity that ended up being on this simplex. And so a triangle representation of that was interesting. We had to kind of build out some software and kind of use some software that I found online in order to build these and create like a little Python module to do that. But yeah, I think it was worthwhile because it made for an impactful comparison, which is ultimately what we were trying to achieve there. I think one of the, so in a lot of what you're going to see is I use Adobe Illustrator to essentially update, annotate, and modify the figures that I make. And a lot of those come out of MATLAB or Python, but ultimately they pass through Illustrator. And so I think one of the concerns that scientists or engineers could have about doing that is the fact that all of a sudden now you're kind of fiddling with your figures, and how do I know that my figure is now the actual data? Am I actually being honest about the data? I won't show you the details of how you do this, but there are ways in order to make sure that you are faithful to the figure and to the scientific data that you're trying to present. So for example, in this scenario, these are 5 signals that I probably plotted separately. And in that context, it would have been easier if I'd already plotted them on the same time duration. It's possible that maybe I didn't and had to clip those. Also, they were plotted on individual figures, and I needed to kind of overlay and superimpose those. So there's a simple action, but there are ways like the snap feature, snap to grid feature, and stuff like that in Illustrator that allow you to accomplish this. So I guess my main point here is I don't want you, I think that a message is that there is a way to retain the integrity and make sure that the figures are still faithful. In that process of manipulating the images, not only can you kind of keep them accurate, but you can actually gain some better clarity in the process. So this was a plot where you can see there's this kind of break in the graph where essentially there's a jump in value. And I really didn't want to have this extra length of these long axes. And so I picked a point where I could essentially group some of these bars that weren't scaled by that, and then some of them that were. And so again, there are some very easy ways to very precisely shrink that vertical axis. And again, the point here is that we're able to now display in kind of a non-distracting way the meaningful information from this figure, rather than kind of keep it in its raw format. And there are some I applaud, and I certainly use MATLAB and Python for all of their capabilities to like stylize a figure, but in the end, there's just some things that are difficult to do, and so it makes sense to kind of do some post-processing. This is a nice one because the story I wanted to tell here was that these bars were small. And so I could have easily changed the y-axis to make that smaller, but that point wouldn't have been as clear. And so here we are guiding the reader or the listener to kind of already see the story that I'm kind of giving them a preamble before I describe this, and that's to emphasize this kind of big white space. And so this figure kind of does that very geometrically. This one is similar. Here I wanted to make a distinction between two groups out of some statistics on a network. And so in this context, I had these two groups, and clearly one of them exhibits quite a bit of a range, and the other one does not. And so again, by making this a horizontal figure and making that stretched out, I emphasize that in a way that makes that obvious to the reader. In this one, this is an example of one where I've collected quite a bit of information on the same axes. And this is, again, something that's maybe possible, but difficult to do this directly in MATLAB or Python, or pick your favorite language. So insetting axes in here is useful. Essentially, the control, this was the control, and these are the state trajectories. And so the state trajectories are what I wanted to tell a story about. I felt obliged to show the input that achieves that, just simply for completeness, but that doesn't really need to have a lot of detail. And for example, it didn't make a difference if I put in more time axis grid points or more vertical axis grid points on this figure. The purpose of this is simply just to show some of the geometry and the fact that I did compute it, and a little bit about what it looks like. And you get a little bit more detail in the states, because that's what the narrative is more about. In this right-hand figure, I've kind of used this transparency, again, to highlight the fact that what we're really caring about is not so much this wild oscillation in these gray states, but that these black states are more well-controlled. And so that's an example of, again, highlighting what I want the reader to see beforehand. Especially in a paper, space is always a difficulty, and so oftentimes we have to cut figures simply because there isn't enough space. And so whether it's, for example, insetting an axis within another axis, or whether it's combining a schematic and a figure together, this again is a simple way of, you may have generated this separate figure separately and this figure separately, and you could always combine it either in LaTeX or in Word or whatever kind of word processing you're doing. But there's the benefit of being able to move these around easily. So, and again, resolving how much detail I needed to show. Essentially here in this black curve, I'm just showing the fact that this has a nice convergence, and so that's all I really need to show. I don't need to show any more detail. So again, leveraging that customizability that you get with post-processing really helps with space. This is something I see a lot. This is kind of at odds with the adage, say it again, and tell them it again. In this scenario, when you're trying to essentially build a legend for a figure, oftentimes we'll have a figure, say the left-hand figure, and we'll put all of the legend items, and then we'll have the right figure, and we'll put all the legend items again. But there's actually some items that are in common. So for example, the blue ellipse is exactly the same in both of these figures. And then the black shaded region, this represents a reachable set. And even though it's different in the two scenarios, it can be described in a single legend entry. So I like to do this a lot where I combine the legend for a kind of a duplex of figures. It really helps to, I think, bring a lot of clarity and conciseness to the figures. This is another example of a theme that we've already talked about, which is essentially reducing the amount of information you're presenting in order to help to make your point clear. So for example, these are stimuli that, sorry, not stimuli, these are the recordings from simulated neurons. And so essentially this is seizure behavior that kind of persists. And so what we'd like to show is the fact that our stimulus that we applied is able to stop that. And so, again, this is real data. This is real signals. I'm being faithful. These are accurately represented in terms of amplitudes, but the exact amplitude is something that we showed on a previous plot and doesn't need to be replicated here in this context. So again, reducing that information just to the important bits. And again, this time axis, I don't need to clutter that with so many different numbers. That doesn't help the reader. All right. Again, reducing information here. This starts to get at a really important theme, and one that I see in a lot of figures that I start to work with is the fact that putting figures that you want a reader to compare and contrast on similar scales and similar aspect ratios is really, really important. There's tons of times, at least in my work, I imagine in everybody's works, where we're doing some amount of comparing and contrasting. And so there it's essential to help the reader really kind of understand what they're looking at. And so in this scenario, you can see I've essentially each row is essentially a different thing. I've labeled it as something different. And I haven't repeated that scale, and that really emphasized the fact that these are really all at the same scale. In fact, it's even easier than if I had labeled the y-axis on every single one of these and the x-axis on every single one of these. It's more obvious that they're the same now that I haven't labeled them. And this allows me to now just simply focus on the shapes of these plots, which starts to get at the overall story that I'm trying to tell the reader. So I mentioned that our end goal is to really tell a story. This one's a nice one because really all that mattered was the fact that I had a dynamical system that started at these different states, and I was able to demonstrate my ability to control it by essentially driving it to another state. And so I picked a set of arbitrary states where it was 1 through 15, and then those swapped, and so 1 went to 15, 2 went to 14, and so on. And so again, I felt obliged to show the input that actually accomplished that. People are interested, say, in the magnitude of that and the duration of the signal, and so also interested in seeing how large the states get along the process. But in the end, the story I wanted to tell was the story that I was able to achieve this state transfer. And so in that context, demonstrating that very explicitly with these side plots was important. I have favorite fonts, and I recommend that everyone should have favorite fonts. That may seem at odds, and that's okay. Maybe your favorite font can be Arial, but I think it's easy to go through. There's a number of good repositories for fonts. Google now has a really nice repository for fonts. There's one that's called just dafonts.com, and pick out a couple that are simple but elegant. And I think essentially if I had made this with Arial or Times New Roman, this wouldn't look nearly as fancy or as kind of thought through and prepared, I think, as it does, even though this is a very simple and very basic kind of figure that I put together. So I think having some favorite fonts, and you'll notice that the font that I'm using in this box is the same font that I'm using in this PowerPoint presentation. And so once you find a couple that you like, you don't have to change it. It can be your gold standard. Despite the fact that I use Adobe Illustrator and a number of other tools very widely, I try to use the right tool when it's necessary. In this case, I did use a TIX library for LaTeX in order to generate these figures. It did a good job, and it was complicated enough that if I had to repeatedly update this, it would have been very tedious. So ticks was a really good use case for this particular figure, and so I went with that and didn't try to do the Illustrator route. The axes and legend, we get drilled into, hopefully drill this into grade school students, but it's something that's easy to forget. And so I think MATLAB by default makes these really, really tiny. And so as you're presenting, especially to an audience, if it's a large audience that's kind of squinting at your projector screen, but this is also true in papers, you need to make sure that these are large enough. And so, you know, the alternative is to have twice as many horizontal and vertical ticks, but make them smaller. And so I prefer to have fewer and bigger, as long as that doesn't reduce my ability to read it. One thing is, this is particularly true if you're trying to publish in a good journal. If you're trying to publish in, say, science or something like that, it's helpful to make a figure that looks like it belongs in science. And so this figure was generated using Mathematica. And so we use some special shading and everything that goes on there, and just kind of the selection of how we did that, I think makes it look like it belongs. And I think that that helps in the, probably in the review process, and also just kind of in the presentation of your work overall. Let me know if I'm running too long. I only have a few more slides here. This
That's
one?
Okay.
Okay, this is a figure that I have essentially just used to illustrate the concept of a kind of a what I called a p-probable set, essentially like a confidence set on your probability distribution. This is something I also made in Mathematica, and here, you know, it took me a little while. I had to, you know, generate the surface, had to generate the Monte Carlo simulation down here. So I did all of that just simply as an illustrative figure. So my point is to spend the time to make a really good illustrative figure. I've used this countless times now, and so it's certainly paid back in dividends. I talked at the beginning about wanting to be able to have a figure that allowed you to talk in some depth. And so this is an example of one way to do that. The main story I want to show is the fact that the red is bigger than the blue, is bigger than the purple, is bigger than the black. A secondary interesting story is one that I can talk to, which is the difference between the bold and the more transparent lines, and the fact that we get a overall shift downwards, but that red, blue, purple, black is still perceived there. So this is a way of generating a figure that effectively has one story, but then has a story that I could talk to if I had a more detailed audience or more time, or had a follow-up question. So this is a great way to pack in more without really complicating or obscuring the story. Again, I'm just going to hit the point that having consistency and choosing aspect ratios that make sense are really important. Consistency is something so that I can compare these figures well. Aspect ratios is important. If this is an ellipse, it's useful to put this on a scale that's honest with the shape of the ellipse. So I don't want to squash that ellipse and make it look like a pancake or make it look like a circle if it is not either of those two things. In this case, what I've done is this is a figure in that same paper. So if I switch back here, I've got an orange ellipse, a green ellipse, and a blue ellipse. And so those appear as dots now in this figure. And so using color and, again, consistency across figures can help you really make that story, not just within a single figure, but across your paper. And again, similar, this is an example of, in the second plot, I want people to be able to compare these two. If I had put this on a different y-axis, it wouldn't have been very obvious. Reader would have to do their own calculus in their mind in order to kind of transform and arrive at the conclusion. Now I've done that for them, and they can very clearly see that this purple line is very big compared to this blue line that happened in figure 1, and that the blue line in figure 2 here is very similar to the blue line in figure 1. I struggled with this for a while. I really wanted to put this in LaTeX and build a table, but I wanted to add some annotations. I want to highlight, draw people's eye to essentially how the rankings of these these statistics changed after when we did something different. And so that's what these little lines are meant to do, essentially show you where that's moved after we've done something different. And so I couldn't have done that with a LaTeX table. So instead of making a table, I made a figure, and it just looks a lot like a table. So I think that's a useful tool. And then these are my two last slides. These are probably some of the most complicated ones that I've made. This one and this one. And these are complicated, and they border on certainly not being obvious compared to my other figures. But one of the things is that I could essentially give an entire talk just talking around this and wild hand gesticulations. And so again, if you're comfortable talking about your topic, you could talk about your entire paper, your entire presentation, simply oriented around a single figure. And I think there's a lot of value both in presenting that to the reader or the person watching you, but also for yourself to build that, to make a concise version of your story, and to put your insight down into either paper or presentation form. All right, so that's all I've got. I hope that was helpful and hit on some interesting points, and I'm very excited to hear what the other presenters have to say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ruths, for the great, informative presentation. So we move on with Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I share my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for the invitation first. And then I really agree with Dr. Ruth's tips on preparing figures and everything. And then that's actually was the advice that I received from my advisor as well. And in the papers and conferences, presentations, figures are really important. Majority of the time, people just look at the figures. So that's really helpful, and I'm pretty sure that's benefit a lot of the audience here. So yeah,
sorry, Lynn, we've seen your presentation. Your slide in the presentation mode, not
okay.
The main view. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
I think
let me do that again.
Sure.
Sorry, because I have multiple screens and sometimes
I see.
appear as sorry about that.
No worries.
So yeah, when E reached out to me regarding the CSS talk event, how to present your research, the first thing that came into my mind is that I would like to talk about my experience. I'm looking for an academic job. So to be honest, I look for academic job for 2 years, since 2019. And because of the pandemic, some of the job was canceled. So I had a lot of experience, and I wish when I was looking for an academic job, there is a platform that can help me with useful tips or like that. But I'm very lucky because my advisor, Dr. Sanipur, she provided a lot of supports, and she gave me a lot of tips as well. So here today, what I want to introduce, or what I want to talk in the CSSC professional development event, is to how you talk yourself into an academic job, and what is my experience, and I just want to share a bit of it. So in this presentation, I'm just going to talk about first what is structure and timing of the academic job market, and then second, how to find your fit. It doesn't matter whether you want to look for a postdoc or you want to look for a faculty position, you always want to find your fit. And then third is how to compile or compiling application materials. So out of 200 or 300 application materials, how you stand out in a finalist. And then how to prepare job talks. And job talks related to research talks, it's different than your dissertation, it's different than conference presentation. So job talks is another really tricky, and you need a lot of guidance and tip before you prepare. So I'm just going to share my experience, and I was in your shoes back in this spring, so not long ago, and I have some fresh memory of my experience. And I just want to do a quick survey in the audience. So first, how many of you planning to apply for a job as a professor in the near future, like 1 or 2 years? So let me see, just give a hands up. I don't know if I can see. I do see, yeah, I do see a couple. And I know that UTD has a large group of PhD students. And PhD students, essentially, a majority of PhD students would like to find an academic job. And then second, who feels confident going to academic job market right now? So approaching to graduate, so students who have like 1 year, 1.5 year to graduate, would it be comfortable? Okay, I do see some hands as well. And who has a detailed conversation with his or her dissertation supervisor about the job market, about academic job? And also it will be related, the next question is who had a conversation with a friend about it? So I'm going to academic job and I'm pretty sure that I'm going to step up as a professor. Okay. So yeah, it is a very concerning questions, and then it's really in a lot of people's minds that I would like to look for a job as a professor and I would like to stay in academia. So how we achieve that? Okay, before that, let's take a look at the realities of the job market. So there are two ways. Actually, in a lot of schools, there in almost every field, there are not enough tenure track positions. So for example, only 40% of science and engineering doctorate holders are employed in academia. So it's a very competitive market. And then 2016, UC San Francisco study on postdoc alumni, and then only 37 were in full-time faculty position, even after postdoc training. And then 2015 study, it's an old study, and it's even more competitive in academia in this pandemic. So 25th of the institution produced 71 to 86% of tenure track in computer science, biomedical, and history. So we are in a good position as we are engineers, and also it's a very compelling, it's a very competitive market. And then second is I just want to introduce a little bit about timeline of the US academic job. It's essentially starting fall, and a lot of schools start posting their ads, and the hiring circle began to work. And this fall 2021, some of the school already post their tenure track job openings. And then interviews may occur at the end of fall, so may occur in December. So I received some of the phone interview last December and the December before. So some schools starts really early. And in winter is basically from December to February, a lot of phone and Skype interviews occurred, and some in-person interview depending on how early they want to start. And then so I was interviewed with a couple of schools, and then some of schools they say that if they are very good R1 university, they want to start earlier. So they want to compete with the other schools to find good candidate. So usually a good R1 university will start very early in winter. And then in spring, a lot of in-person interviews occurred, and then offers are made in spring, and then back and forth, and short-term job openings posted. And usually in spring, some of the postdoc jobs will be offered because of the funding cycle. So this is pretty much the timeline. And then we are in the fall semester. So if you are graduating next year and then you want to start your position as a professor in fall, then you probably need to start this fall, apply this fall. So the typical hiring process is from the search committee in a school, they post a job opening and then they collect their applications. So they have a soft or hard deadline for application materials, and it usually will be end of fall or beginning of January. And then they develop a long list, usually about 12 to 15 candidates out of the application. So then they become a short list after phone interview. So the short list is usually when you step onto a job interview. So you do a research seminar, a teaching seminar in a job talk, and then they make offer to their top candidate. Okay, so where you can find this advertisement? So there are a couple ways. So the first is professional societies, the job boards and email list servers, sometimes from, for example, CSSC, this kind of platform, when professors have some connections in schools, they want candidates for a certain position, they reach out to CSSC and then email to all the list servers. And then in some of the conferences, for example, I usually attend Biomedical Engineering Society annual conference. And in that conference, we have a session just for PhD who wants to look for faculty. So the section called Faculty Candidates. The school will come up to look for faculty candidates, and then PhD students are presenting their work in a way that it's kind of superior, because the conference usually starts in October. So you get a chance to talk to hiring committee or search committee before they even start post a job. And then there are also job databases. So higheradjobs.com is the one that I usually search for academic jobs. And then also we have academicjobs.com, JobWiki, and hurryjobs.org. And also very important is that word of mouth. So if you hear some your advisor are talking about, okay, there are some openings over there, why not you try? Definitely try that, because that's mostly fit you and it's already be there. It's and then so be aware when there is a conversation between your advisor or your or the society. Okay, so next is how to find your fit. So we want to carefully target the right jobs, and then is this right for me? And what are my skills? What are my interests? What are my values? And then are these values competitive enough to help me get tenured? Because this is also very important for the hiring committee. They want to hire somebody and they want to keep them in their department for at least 6 years. And also look at some of the questions on the, I will send the questions later. I have collected so many questions during the interview, so to help me to prepare interviews. And also as an applicant, we want to convey our fit to the institute where you are applying. So what is the fit? So your academic identity cohorts with the academic identities of the department. So do I fit well with the mission, with the location of the institute, the culture, intellectual climate, and where I'm applying? Do I vision myself in a comfortable position? That's what you need to consider. And also you need to convey this fit to the institute during your interview. And to prepare, when you prepare your application material, which is the first step to work you into academic job, is that you have to tailor your materials to the job opening. So read the advertisement carefully and see what are the keywords and what are the skills they're looking at, and then how you tailor your application material to fit in their mission, culture, and location. So basically, the application materials you need is first reference letters. You need 3 to 5 reference letters. So reach out to your committee members, your advisor now. And then cover letter is also really important. So the cover letter is the first step to work you to the application material. People always look for cover letter first, and then CV, and then research statement, teaching statement. So to me, I would say that cover letter is the most important material in this package. And then the CV, you have to tailor it to fit the skills, like I just mentioned, to convey your fit in the institution. And then also research statement and teaching statement, it doesn't need to be as long as like 10 page. For me, I only prepare 3 page for each. And teaching, I think I only have 2 page. So in this statement, research and teaching statement, you are not putting all your papers and then all the technical stuff. You're just conveying your skills, your skill set, and what you have done, and your potential in your future position as a professor. And then also, if you're looking for a postdoc job, research statement is also really important because it tells you how you fit in the group. In a group that you are stepping up as a staff engineer or staff researcher as a postdoc. So you want to express your skill sets. You want to let them know that how much achievement you have made. And then optionally, there will be a requirement of evidence of teaching. So I was doing a teaching assistant for heat transfer lab during UTD when I was in UTD. So I always keep track of my evidence of teaching. For example, I took some pictures in the lab when getting the consent from the students. And then also I save my syllabus. So these are all evidence of teaching, the availability here. So I can do syllabus, I can do classroom teaching. And then if you have that material, save it now. Okay, so then after your application materials are picked, there will be a short phone interview, usually 15 to 20 minutes, and then they will usually come up with 5 to 7 questions. And what you expect on the phone interview, so before the phone interview, you have to know with whom you're likely to meet. The committee members, the search committee members, they are the first line of people that you are dealing with. And then there are some fair questions in the question set, and I can send it later. And then there are some unfair questions. So something personal, that's unfair questions. So be aware of that before your phone interviews and prepare for those fair questions. So for example, tell me about yourself and what is your research interest and what's the first proposal that you are going to write in your first year, second year. These are fair questions. And then express clearly in the phone interview. So make sure you're in a quiet position, quiet location for the phone interview because it's only like 20 minutes. And then also you can say slowly, but express clearly. And don't go too long for each question. 2 to 3 minutes per question is good enough. And make a good impression, even though if it's a phone interview and nobody sees you, but still be energetic and be positive and show you're excited. Make a very good impression to your audience. And then also take notes to their questions. So their questions sometimes may be longer than you expected, so be sure to take some notes. And make sure to prepare your own questions. So at the end, every phone interview, they will ask you, do you have questions for us? Then definitely you ask 1 to 2 questions. Don't ask so many. 1 to 2 is good. And after the phone interview in 24 hours, be sure to send a thank you note to everyone, every single one in the committee. Don't just reply all. Okay, after the phone interview, the search committee reach out to you, then congratulations, you're on the short list. And they might only be like 3 to 4 candidates in the short list, and you need to prepare your job talk. So before the job talk, you need to research the institute, check their website, and then see if you have any personal network to the institute, and then know some of the values, missions, and history of the school, and what are the research area currently, what are the topics they are doing, and student involvement in research, and what is the student population. So for example, for me, San Jose State is a minority serving institute, so there are a lot of minority students in this institution, and student involvement that I searched the website and I see that every students are involved in research activities, starting from senior design, and then in the master's program, every students need to do a thesis to graduate. So here is kind of where you can envision yourself to guide your group, your research group. And in the research seminar, so usually it's 45 to 50 minutes research seminar, and they will reserve a 1 hour slot for you to do research talk, but be sure don't go over 50 minutes because you always need to leave 10 minutes for your audience to ask questions. And then also in the research seminar, don't be too technical to your, for example, don't just put technical details in the research talk, and don't treat it as a dissertation, because these are not your committee members. These are the audience from all the faculties in the department and all the students, graduate students. So you have to reach those who are not in your specialty. So third is make your presentation relevant, which is also like reach to those who are not in your specialty. So make sure they understand. And then fourth is to conclude with a slide that conveys your teamwork. So I know as a PhD student, sometimes we just focus on our projects and then we just stick to our papers and then projects at certain time. But teamwork is a very important value that you want to convey to your audience and also to your search committee. So always remember to conclude that in your research talk. And also include your publications, awards, and scholar activities. If you have a picture, put it there. If you don't have a picture, put your awards picture as well. And then planning for questions. So I know some of us already have experience in conference talk, so you might get similar questions from the audience for your research talk. So plan ahead and then practice with your friends, with your advisor, with your colleagues. Practice, practice, and practice, and then planning for all the questions that may occur during the time when you have research seminar. Always get prepared. And also, sorry.
Excuse me, Lynn. Sorry for interrupting you. I would appreciate it if you wrap it up in 5 minutes. Thank you so much.
Definitely.
Thank you.
I just have like
Sure.
2 more. Yes. So also you might have a teaching seminar. Subjects doesn't matter for a teaching seminar. It's a way that you demonstrate your teaching ability. So, and make it simple. Just include one case study or a real world example, and also engage your audience. So ask questions, make up some assignment, just as when you would do when you teach, and planning for questions. So to conclude, what you would do in an interview is remember, interview is a two-way street. So they are interviewing you and you also want to know whether it's a good fit for you. And then also be confident but humble. Don't be overconfident. And then be professional. So act professional, talk professional, and be honest. If you don't know, just say, sorry, I don't have the answer at this point, but I will get back to you. Something like that. And then ask questions, prove that you're interested in this job. What you do not do in an interview is do not come off as overconfident, like I just said, and avoid talk of politics and religion. And third, do not dismiss anyone. So the students and staff are just as important as faculty. They evaluate you during the interview and they provide feedback as well. And final thoughts is, if you're looking for any job in academics, first you want to define your career path, where you envision yourself in the next 3 to 5 years, and then you have to sell this vision to your audience. And also another is very important is to plan ahead. The more you practice, the more comfortable you will be. The more effort you put in preparing answers, the more the hiring group will be impressed. So yeah, that's it. And thank you so much for your attention. And thank you for inviting me to this event. And I would like to take any questions, short questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for the great presentation. Actually, we are somehow running out of time, so I will keep all the questions for the end, for the Q&A and the open discussion at the end of the talks. Yes. So thank you so much. And so we have Farid now. And if Farid, are you here?
Do you hear me?
Yes. Hello. How are you?
Yeah. And hello, everybody. Great to be in the UTD community again. Actually, I miss being in UTD. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying the new building because they waited for me to graduate and then move to the new building.
Yeah. So yeah, it has been changed so much here. So thank you for accepting the invitation. So, and I will hand it over to you for your talk.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was enjoying the presentations from my fellow panelists. Kind of, I put some short slides here. Let me find a way to share the screen. Haven't done this for a while in Teams. Let me see. Where is it? Sharing the screen. Slide 2, no.
There is a share button, share content button close to the leave button on top if you find it there. Are you using the app or?
I'm using the app.
So it's close to the leave button on top.
I don't see a leave button, by the way. Let me see.
Or it's close to your mic.
Okay, I see camera, I see mute, then open share tray, and then bunch of other things, raise hand, show conversation. Oh, sorry guys.
No worries. But could you, if you couldn't find it, then you can just send me, I can share it or.
Okay. Yeah, don't know why. How can I find this? Okay. Just give me a second. I send this to you, Nasser, and then you take it from there.
No problem. If you think we can move on with Jonathan, if you think you need more time.
Perfect. Yes.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
We can move on with Jonathan, and then and then you can sure. Jonathan, if you're available now, we can move on with you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Farid, for letting me go first. Wow, so generous of you. I really appreciate that, man.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so right, my turn. Okay, wonderful. So what I was planning on since I was last, I was thinking, well, we're probably going to run late, so let me try to wrap things up in a big summary and give you everything I've learned in my experience. A couple notes. One, I'm on campus right now, and there's some flybys by F-22, so if you get some lovely background noise, you're welcome. Number two, I'm on a VPN, so if I disconnect, I do apologize. I can't help it. And number three, let's just get into it. So to kind of tell the story of this beginner's guide that I'm going to give you, I want to give you a little bit of background on who I am and what I've done. So I did my bachelor's and master's at Texas A&M. I went to Arizona and worked for Raytheon. And then I came back into academia to get my PhD at UTD, which was a lovely experience. And now I'm at NASA developing spacesuits. And what I wanted to do today was give you a little bit of an understanding of the shortcomings and the highlights of what many presenters do in academia and in industry. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was something that Dr. Ruths touched on in his presentation, which was telling a story. And I put a little graphic here that you can look at, and it's 4 different people all interpreting the same thing differently. So I hate to break this down to you for all the engineers, which is all of us out in the audience, but number one is presenting is not a science, it's an art form. You have to understand, feel the audience, and bring them to your side. And the second thing is when you're telling a story, you need to tell people exactly what you want them to understand, rather than everyone interpreting things differently. So along with this, to help along with this, what you want to have is clarity in your message. You don't want to have any different altering viewpoints other than yours and the audience's to digest. The second thing you can try to understand is convincing people of your ideas. I believe it was Dr. Jiang who talked about being a salesman. My advisor during my PhD was one of the best proponents of my research because he knew how to sell my ideas. And I recommend everyone practice this every single day, talking with your colleagues, talking with your advisor, talking with your random friends throughout the university. Help them understand your research in different ways, because whether you're in academia or in industry, one problem I see is researchers or research engineers have a very difficult time sometimes describing highly complex ideas to management or to people who aren't familiar with them. So selling your ideas not only to other highly technical professionals, but to others who may not be in your area of expertise is a very important and valuable skill. The third thing is research is really hard. I know all of you are probably struggling, thinking, how am I going to complete this thing? You can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think it's very important when you're presenting to incorporate both your achievements and also the effort that you put into it. People need to understand where you come from and why you put so much effort and time into what you're doing. So the one-liner for this slide is learn to tell a story. Help the audience understand you. Which leads into my next major point is find your voice. And I've got a fun little cartoon from Charles Schultz here. It's be yourself. I can't express this enough. I spent years throughout my academic studies trying to find my voice, trying to understand who I was when I was presenting. And for many of us, we're all going to sound different, act different, and look different, and that's awesome. The most important thing you need to do is find who are you whenever you're presenting. For example, you may see in my slides, I don't like to use a lot of text. I don't like to have a lot of extra things. I like to let my voice and my projection of what I want to tell you come through rather than the slide. The slide for me is just something to prop up what I'm saying. So find your voice. And the best thing I can give you as far as advice for this is one, draw inspiration from presenters you admire. Like I had mentioned earlier during my academic career, you'll all go to conferences and you'll all hear presentations of varying levels, and there are going to be some that stand out to you. And when you're listening to these presentations, write down exactly what they're doing that you want to copy. Mimic these styles, try them out yourself, and see if they fit in with who you are. And as you're mimicking and drawing inspiration from various styles, refine your approach. I find that whenever I'm doing practice talks or practice presentations, I will give a segment on what I want to say, and I'll think about it in the time between the presentation and my practice talk and say to myself, I don't like how this sounds. Maybe I should word it more towards the beginning of my presentation. Maybe I should use a different word. I find this is very valuable, is refining your approach, not only in the editing of your slides, but also in the editing of how you say things. You'd be surprised how well people receive your message when you change the wordage so that they understand more clearly. And the last thing, which I hinted at just previously, was visualize your presentation. This is something I've learned to do throughout my entire career, which is the offline calculations that go on inside your head before you even stand behind the podium. And what I'm talking about is when you lay down in bed and you're ready to relax and you think, man, should I have put that figure in there? And you start to calculate how your presentation will sound in your mind. So the first thing I would say is think before you present. Think about what you're going to say. Think about how people will receive it. Think about how your presentation is tailored for particular people. The second thing I would say is practice. And I know your advisors and your colleagues tell you this all the time. Practice, practice, practice. And another thing I wanted to do with this presentation today is tell you why. Why does your practice matter? Because the more you practice, the more comfortable you are with your material, the better your presentation will sound. This is why we practice, to give off a better presentation. And the third thing is prepare a set of backup slides. You never know if you're going to have that one stickler in the audience who asks you that one question that you just didn't have enough time to prepare for. So it's always valuable to have backup slides. These can be slides with copious amounts of mathematics. These can be slides with extra figures that you can refer to in your explanations, or these can be slides with references that you didn't have time to put into your presentation. And now for my favorite slide, which is my personal do's and don'ts. And I know you've all heard a bunch of do's and don'ts, but what I wanted to tell you is the why behind the do, not rather than just do. So my first do is maintain eye contact. Why? When you maintain eye contact with various members of the audience, what you're doing is you're instilling inside of them a sense of trust. They're listening and your message is being conveyed clearly. The second do is practice, which I just talked about. I can't stress this enough. Practice with your colleagues, practice with your advisor, practice with your mom and dad if you want to. A wide range of audience will always help because you never know who's going to give you different viewpoints and questions for those viewpoints. Present with energy. Why? The energy you present to the audience is the energy you're going to receive. If you show up and you're a little bit down, sad, or tired, the audience is going to question why and probably return that same energy to you. So when you show up to your presentation, have a big smile on your face, be happy to be there, and bring the energy you want your audience to feel. And my fourth do is answer questions directly. Why should you do this? I think we've all been in a situation where you were asked a difficult question and you don't really know the answer, or it's not a very pretty answer. Answering questions directly, again, instills trust in the audience. Rather than diverting or divulging different information or down a different path, you're looking at your audience clearly and saying, I don't know, or you're answering their question in their line, which gives them more trust in what you're saying overall. And now for my don'ts, which I'm also subject to some of these, so feel free to critique me. Show up late. It's probably the most rude thing to do if you show up late to your presentation. So set 3 alarm clocks if you have to. Call your friend and tell them to wake you up in the morning, but make sure you're on time. It shows off as professional, and it makes you have a better presentation overall. Mumble. Why shouldn't you mumble? Mumbling, particularly in academic or industrial setting, is very disadvantageous for you. In academia, I think the majority of graduate students and professors speak different languages. So it's very, very important that you are clear, distinct, and articulate exactly what you're saying. Also in industry, where many people speak different languages, but also where precision is of the highest importance. Mumbling can dilute your message and your conversation with your peers. Ums, ers, and ahs. Sometimes I fall victim of this, and I know everyone else does, but why are these not a good thing to have in your presentation? Whenever you hear a presenter saying or what it's portraying to your audience is that the presenter is calculating. They're having to think about what they want to say next. So this can convey one of two ideas. One, they didn't practice, which sometimes that falls onto me, I need to practice. But two, it means you're not sure of what you're saying because you're having to calculate what you want to say next. And I know for a lot of us who speak many different languages, some of these uhs and erms come from you calculating what you want to say because it's a different language. What I recommend is practicing in the language you're going to present in over and over and over so that your message is 100% clear to you. Then when you present to your audience, it will come off as strong, powerful, and knowledgeable. Don't panic. At the end of the day, we're all humans. We all make mistakes. We all show up to a conference with a USB, a laptop, and none of it works, and you're kind of stuck just hanging out. Like one of our presenters who's having a little trouble with Teams, that's okay. We're all human. We all make mistakes. Everyone in the audience wants you to succeed. I want you to succeed. And at the end of the day, take a deep breath, look your audience in the eye, and don't panic. We're all on the same team. So that's my short and sweet synopsis of what I had planned for today because I thought I would be last and we'd run out of time. I hope that was informative and I hope you learned something from it. If you have any questions for me or about what I said, feel free to stop me and ask me or even anything. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for the great presentation and informative presentation that you present. So now we can move on with Farid, but I will share the presentation yeah.
Apparently I had a chance to listen to Jonathan as well, so that was a privilege, actually. So Nasran, you should have.
Yes, I have. So
I still haven't found the share screen button in my app. So apparently there's something.
Yeah, so yeah, that's okay. So could you see the slides?
Yeah. Whenever I need to change, I see them. Whenever I need to change, I will let you know. Okay. So basically, yeah, I'm going to take a industrial perspective approach kind of to this topic, and I'm assuming a scenario that you are presenting for an industrial audience where you want to seek a job, you want to take an industrial position, and those are the assumptions that will hold through my presentation. In the next slide, I think one important piece that we want to cover, Nasran, if you move to the next slide, that will be great. Yes. In the assumptions that I mentioned, going through the industrial situation, presenting to an industrial audience, first stop and ask yourself before preparing, ask yourself that, have this person worked in your specific area before, or do they know the same details about your area that you do, or even more, are they interested in theoretical findings and theoretical details of your research as you do? Probably you can go deeper and ask, okay, is this guy as interested as I am in my results and in my research? Or do they want to know more about your problem? If the answers to these questions could be yes and could also be no, that could be a game changer, because if you don't present the material that the other person wants to hear, you are wasting your time. Your great results, if they don't interest the audience, you will not make the goal. So with these questions asked in the beginning, you will probably find a no answer for this. Now, in the next slide, I think we should think about, okay, what should I do? Dale Carnegie has a great book in human relations. I just copied the sentence from him. He says, if there is any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that person's perspective as well as yours. This is critical, because you should present your work in the way that the other person wants to see and the other person needs to see. So you can ask yourself, if I was this person, what would I like to hear? Or what is in my research that can interest this person? And why is that? Why that person should be interested in this specific part of my presentation or my research? Or how can I earn the trust of this person? That is very important. Put yourself in the other person's situation and see what this person wants to hear from me. And that's the great starting point, I think. That is not applicable just to research for anything else we do with anybody else. So not just through presentation. It's a life lesson. Just put the other person's shoes, put on yourself on the other person's shoes, and see what they are kind of interested in. So in the next slides, we will move through this a little bit. So if you want to see what is important for that person, I think you should go back to yourself and see what skills you have. Now, earning a PhD has given you great abilities. One of the greatest skills, and I think the most important skill that a PhD gives to you, is the ability to solve a problem. And that is beyond your specific area, beyond your area that you are expert in, and that goes really above and beyond kind of your specific problem. Your audience has a real world problem in hand. In industry, they have a very practical, hands-on problem. You need to convince them that you are the person who have the skill to solve this problem. And to start this, you need to describe your problem in a very concise, very clear way. Don't go to the details. Show the big picture. Why are you solving this problem? And what was the problem? Basically, if you solve this problem, what is going to change? What are the benefits of this problem? What are the practical outcomes and practical benefits of this problem? Shape the big picture. Show them that you are aware of the big picture and you know what you're doing from a big picture, from a very big picture. And to describe the big picture, the other person, to understand the big picture, the other person doesn't know doesn't need to know details about your work. In a very high picture, big kind of scenario, where is your research, what your problem is, and what are you going to solve? Don't go to the details, just shape the problem and show how the problem is important and why the problem is important. The details that you present just is shallow enough to present the idea. If you're solving a problem, I don't know, in computer science, just shape the bigger problem and see if I solve this, what would be the outcome and how this will benefit the world. So that's showing the great picture that you should show. So problem solving is one of the skills that you need to present. The other innovation, the other kind of skill that you need to show the audience is that you are an innovator. So when you face the problem, the day one you pick the problem, there were many unknowns to you. One of the things that you did was that you learned many things and many skills to be able to solve this problem. So you are a guy who can take a problem, go discover facts about it, go learn new things about it, and come and solve it. So this is very important. This is something that the other guy wants to hear. The audience wants to see that if you are given a new problem, you are able to go investigate, research, understand what other people have done on that, understand the gap, and fill the gap by innovation. This is the piece that you should be able to transfer. You should show them that you are able to solve a problem if you are given a problem. So in a next slide, we will talk about the other thing, which is very important in business, which is time. Great problems are not solved over a night, and you shouldn't wait for a long time without any results such that the problem gets solved. It is not possible to afford waiting for a very long time in business. So what is important here is that you have a skill that can help you break the problem down to smaller pieces and then deliver the results on those pieces one by one. This is very important, and you have done this in your research. So over 4 years, over 5 years of doing research, every year you had a milestone that you achieved, and you have a trend of publications. You have a trend of results just piling up on top of each other. So this is the breakdown that you want to present. How did you achieve the point that you are at the end by breaking down the problem and delivering each of them on a given time? So that shows that if they give you a problem, you won't disappear for 4 years and then come back with a solution. You will break down the problem and deliver step by step. And even in your presentation, that you should respect this kind of gradual delivery of results and respecting time. Just give them enough details and put enough details in the presentation that you don't need to rush over them. Just smoothly over time, just present what you want to do and show them that you have this skill. In the next slide, I think we can talk about what matters most. Again, this is very critical because you want to see the world from their perspective. And if you think about it, you have a problem as a PhD student. We have PhD graduate. You have a problem. You have spent 4 years on this. You have spent more than 4 years maybe on this, and this is very interesting to you. That you are very passionate about this, and you are very passionate about it, the results you've got. The other people are just like you. They are very passionate about their problem. They are very passionate about the problem they are solving right at this time. So everybody is like this. So everybody is interested in their own problem. So if you want to grab their attention, attract their attention, you should ask yourself and turn it into a point that can show that your research can solve their problem. That is important. You should show that how your research can potentially benefit them. Is there a direct application of your research in their work? Maybe one of the methods that you have used in your work can be readily applicable to their problem, or you can sort of relate what you have done in your research to the application that they are solving. So to answer this problem, this question, you should do your homework about the audience. Go and investigate. Okay, what are the problems? What are the top most important problems that these folks are working on? What are the challenges in this area, and how I can relate those to those challenges? This is something they want to hear.
I have a question. So how do we connect our homework to our research?
I mean, do your homework about your audience. So if you're going to present your audience in an industrial situation, you know what that industry is. Just do your homework, go research about them, Google and find out what these guys are doing. You don't know, you won't be able to know what exactly they are doing, but you can find some general information. For example, if you're going to present to Amazon, for example, you know that Amazon have different businesses. They have retail, they have you know, a cloud, they have many businesses, and in each of these you can go and find blogs, publications, or things like that from this team, and know that what this team is interested in, what are their problems.
So I need to know what the big companies are doing, right?
Yeah, try to connect yourself from their to their problem, and connect your research to their problem. Maybe your research is in a specific area in the computer science, but there is a method that you have used. That method could be applicable in, just given an example, in an AI setting that they are solving their problem. So connect the dot and show them that you are interested in their problem, because they are interested in their own problem. That's
right.
I want to say. So yeah, if that answers your question, hopefully.
Yes.
I would appreciate it if you, thank you, Farid. I would appreciate it to keep your questions for the Q&A session, because we're running out of time. So
definitely.
Sorry for interrupting.
Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, in the next slide, I think the other thing, Nasaran, we have in the next slide is be to the point. I think Jonathan touched on this point as well. When someone is asking you a question, just listen carefully and make sure you understand the person. If you don't understand, it's okay. Just ask them to repeat, or repeat their question to confirm that you have the right understanding of the question. And when you have the right understanding, answer to the point, directly to the point, and answer the question first. If there is a yes or no question, feel free to say yes and no, and then continue, or say I don't know, as Jonathan mentioned. Be concise on this. Do not provide additional information, extra information, just to show that you know a lot. Just answer the question to the point, concisely. If they are not happy with what you have given to them, they will ask a follow-up question. Just confirm and make sure that they have got their answer. In the next slide, we will talk about keeping the presentation simple. Just do your presentation to answer three key points. What is the problem you're solving, and why you're solving it, and how you're solving. Don't go to too much details, as I said, just to the level that is important. And one of the most important thing is that the other person is most likely not aware of the jargons or abbreviations in your specific area, and just avoid using them. And if some of them are necessary to be used, just take some time to define them and to explain them. So do not assume that your audience knows some of these abbreviations and then you just use them. Don't do that. In the next slide, we want to touch on case of criticism. So if someone asks you a question that is hard to answer or criticize your work, what should you do? The first thing is, first, be humble. There are a world of knowledge out there that you are not aware of them. But to address this very well, be aware that every argument is as valid as its assumptions. There are some assumptions that kind of support every argument, and the argument is as valid as those assumptions. In case a criticism happens, listen carefully to understand the assumptions. What are the assumptions? Ask yourself, what are the assumptions behind the argument that this person is making? So if you understand the assumptions, there are several cases. Maybe the assumption is valid. If the assumption is valid, then be humble. Show that you're aware of the limitations of your work and you know what they are asking, and that's the area that you will investigate or you will open up because your work has its own assumptions and its own limitations. Maybe the audience is challenging those assumptions in a valid way. Just you need to be very humble here. Or sometimes you see that this is a very good feedback. Yeah, the other person is right. This is the limitation that could be avoided. Then accept it as a gift, because this is a gift. When somebody gives you a valid criticism that can improve your work, that's a gift. That is a very valuable feedback, and take it as a gift and assure that you will kind of implement it. And sometimes the assumption is not valid. You understand the assumption and understand that the assumption is not valid. So clarify that. Say that the assumption that you are saying is not applicable here. And you can work with the person to see if they are happy with this kind of answer. I think this is very important. I think it's the last slide, Nasaran, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It was, it's the last slide. And thank you, Farid.
I didn't take too much time, but happy to answer any questions here.
Thank you so much. And I would like to thank all the panelists for the great presentation. I personally learned a lot from your presentations. And we appreciate your time today for joining us. So now we move on to the Q&A session, and please raise your hand if you have any questions, or just type in the chat so we can take your questions. If you have any questions for panelists, feel free to ask. So we have one. Okay, Lee. Go ahead and ask. Yeah.
I have a question. Is that how to choose your research topic?
Yeah. So anyone, feel free to answer. Whoever wants to answer.
Yeah. So let me ask you a follow-up question. So by research topic, in what scenario do you mean?
In network security, natural language processing, and artificial intelligence.
The scenario for conference or
for conference.
Okay. So it's the research topic for conference, depending on the conference tracks, if I'm not mistaken. Depending.
So I need to fit the conference.
Yes, you need to find the scope in each conference track, and then your paper to see if it's fit in the specific technical track, and then prepare your research talk based on that.
But sometimes some research fits a lot of conference. Then how to choose it?
Then choose the top conference.
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah.
One way to do that is to look at the papers that you are reading that are in that field, and so you can see which venues that they've selected.
Yes,
and that's
I think reading paper is very important. Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, we have Hajir. Hajir, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello. First of all, thank you for everybody for giving such a good presentation. I have a question about how to create a connection through LinkedIn, especially for finding jobs in the industry, because I didn't see much information on that. If there is any specific pointer that you think is very important to find a job through LinkedIn.
Yeah, I can share my personal experience with LinkedIn. So when I was starting looking for a job, I search the people that I'm interested in LinkedIn and always add a note when you try to link to someone, and I also find the potential connection with that person. So when they read the message, they know, okay, we have some mutual interest or we have some connection between us, and they will check your profile, and then most likely you can link to that person. So that's kind of one trick that I use.
Any other comments?
I also have another question. So if I want to help one person to make his LinkedIn account, how can I help him?
You mean create account on LinkedIn?
Yes, create an account and do some, maybe let others to hire them, or to send them invitations, because I want to help people.
Use their personal email like Gmail or stuff to create a account and then give
Yes.
them login credentials. I guess
Yes.
is that what you refer to?
Yeah, because some of my friends, they don't use LinkedIn. Yeah,
Okay.
but I think LinkedIn is a good connection from different companies and us.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea for you to search a little bit about it, because there are a lot of information on net. So about how to just, how to work with LinkedIn somehow, that you can make more connections or help others to do that. So I think it's a
Yes.
good idea to check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, I will do that. Thank you very
Great.
much.
So any other questions for the panelists? If no, I have one question from the audience. They put it in the registration form, so I can ask. They ask that how would you go about writing a proposal to your PI if you are not considered a researcher? So, if you have any comments.
Sorry, I can go first. So
Sure.
may I get an insight into this question? So what does that mean, write a proposal to a PI? So it's an individual proposal the student wants to write by him or herself, or it's a first fellowship, for example, for NSF graduate fellowship or NIH early investigator or transit. So there are a lot of like kind of these awards that students can write proposal at the individual investigator, but with the help of the advisor. So I want to know what is the need behind this question.
Yeah, I don't know if whoever asked this question is here with us so that they can speak. They can clarify on that. But this was the question. This was the question that they put in the registration form. So that's why I asked. There are two other questions here in the chat I can ask. We have one question from Tuan Van. He is asking about, can you share your thinking about the good side and the limited side of working in academia as well as in the industry?
I may go first, I guess. So yeah, I can share my experience. The good side of academia, you have the freedom to work on your research or projects that you want to work on. And personally, I love teaching. So that's why when I first came to my PhD program, I know that I'm going to academia. So it depends on your career goal. And also the good side, I would say the best side of being a faculty is that you are being respected. You have the freedom to do whatever you want in this research, and you get yourself satisfactory based on that. And the limit side, as a faculty member, I would say just the amount of money you earn, especially in Bay Area, people are making millions of dollars, but faculty, we're the same level of payment. So that was the limit side, but But we enjoy it. I personally, I enjoy my work and I love to stay in this area for at least 10 years or so.
Okay, great. Others, if you want to add to what Lynn said. And by the way, I want to just, excuse me, I just want to say that since we are running out of time, if the panelists, we do not want to take your time. So if you want to leave, feel free to leave whenever you want. But we are moving forward with the questions. There are one question in the chat and one question from the audience. So let me ask one question from the chat first. They ask how to make sure we are maintaining our specialty in depth, but at the same time have a good level of knowledge about other aspects.
Sure, I can answer this one. Mine's a little bit different. I know a lot of people will say read research papers. For me, that can get a little monotonous, a little boring at times. So what I like to do every day is, it's a term called a gimbal walk. It's a Japanese term. Basically, you pick a topic in industry, let's say manufacturing, or research and development, or systems engineering, and you walk about the factory floor talking to these people, understanding what they're doing, what projects are they working on, what troubles do they have, are they having success?
So like ninja? Ninja?
Excuse me?
Gimbal.
A Japanese, oh, okay.
Gimbal walk. Talking to all these people and asking them what's going on in your life. When you've done this day after day or week after week, you start to understand different people in your company or in academia are doing different things. So you can do this with your colleagues right now. You can talk to people who research in computer vision, or who are more into robotics, or who are doing biology, and this will give you a much better, well-rounded view of what is current, cutting edge, and state of the art.
Yeah, great.
Maybe I'll just reemphasize. I'll try to bring this back to presenting. And this is something that Jonathan said that I strongly endorse, is the fact that is to use this notion of backup slides. So this of course depends on what your personal taste is like and presentation style, but I do also like to give people a high level view. Most people are coming there for the big idea, not the nitty gritty. They'll come to a paper or something else for the nitty gritty. So but it's good. The best thing that could happen in a talk is you have that guy or person in the audience that's going to try to ask you a tough question, and you're going to have that backup slide sitting there, and all you do is switch straight to that backup slide. It's got more math on it than he can digest, and it clearly proves your point. And so like that's what you'd love to happen every time, is that you've convinced the entire audience without boring them, and then the one person tries to take a stab at you, and you can switch directly to your backup slides. It shows you're prepared. It shows you know your stuff, so it shows that you have that technical depth. But the high level presentation that you haven't bored anybody with is what shows that you have kind of this bigger picture knowledge of what you're presenting. So just a pitch on make sure you have those backup slides.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for great answers. And I think we are almost done with the questions here. And so again, thank you all, the panelists and the audience for their attendance today. And I'm going to stop recording, and have a great weekend all. Yep. I hope to see you all in the next events of the CSSC here at UTD. Okay.
Oh, bye.
Thank you, Nasara, for
you.
organizing.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to
Bye.
see you.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good weekend.